Thank you for joining us for the Clean Air Metals webinar. Abraham Drost is the CEO of AIR and will be discussing yesterday's drill results on the Escape Lake Zone in Thunder Bay North with Executive Chairman Jim Gallagher. Results included 27.9 meters of 3.39 grams per ton platinum and 4.67 grams per ton palladium, 1.67% copper, and 0.9% nickel. As always, you can refer to any disclosures on the company website. After the presentation, we'll open up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can email them to tina@adcap.ca or input them in the Q&A box below. So I'll hand it off to Abraham to give us an update.
I'll give you really an update on Clean Air, a few slides that are directly related to the recent results, but a few summary slides here just to set the context for anyone new to the issuer. So Clean Air Metals was formed around the consolidation of Thunder Bay North and Escape Lake. The vendors were Panoramic of Australia, copper nickel miner, and Rio Tinto, the large international mining house. Obviously, disclaimer around forward-looking statements. Jim and I also call that vision, so we will be sharing some vision statements. Highlights of the company then, the company did raise $15 million in February at 20 cents a unit. That was oversubscribed. And then in addition, after 3 days of trading from May 22nd, the shares ran to 46 cents and we raised flow through at 50 cents. And Jim and I both participated in that round of financing as well. And I want to emphasize that underpinning the project here is a historic estimate of 9.8 million tons at 2.3 grams per ton platinum equivalent in the current lake structure. It's a magma conduit, but that was done with palladium at 512 an ounce US. And of course, palladium has run to in the 1900 range now. And Jim will be providing a few remarks around why we think that's sustainable due to, sort of the climate change imperative. And more particularly, we have platinum palladium present in a 1-to-1 ratio, which is also quite unique. In addition to copper nickel, which is potentially meaningful in terms of future resource development. And we are exploring a second structure, which is really the growth aspect of this story. So it's anything we find there is additive to current lake. Escape Lake is a twin structure. We know it's mineralized from previous work done by Rio and Panoramic, and we are delineating, essentially systematically to working towards a new resource update for both Escape Lake and current lake together. Probably in Q2 next year. It's a process, as you'll appreciate, but we are funded now with the flow through for about 30,000 meters of drilling. And Jim will provide a few comments around palladium prices and what we see in a post-COVID world. The project is located just north of Thunder Bay, where I live, where I'm calling from today. Our field office is here. Our team. 2 drills operating in the field, core shack, the whole works, but we've been very careful around COVID to make sure all the work sites are separated. And maybe there's room for another drill, but we don't want to have too high a density of workspaces around the project. So you'll probably see 2 drills going forward here. Monthly drilling results. Next update planned for mid-August. From 2 drills. So here you have the concessions in green, which is the what we call the Thunder Bay North project, consisting of the current lake deposit sold to us by Panoramic, and the Escape Lake property right in the middle on the intrusive system. And of course, Rio made a discovery there, which we have now made our own, and brought those results to market for the first time on June the 17th. Up in the northwest quadrant, you see the Lac des Îles mine. There it is back in full production, Impala Platinum. 5 million ounces, about 8 years of reserves there. And, but they're guiding 15 years, and so that makes this quite interesting. And also, we see the highway there that it makes our project road accessible, and want to point out that there's a high voltage transmission line just on the southeast portion of our concessions as well. So nicely sandwiched there within a significant infrastructure. Also want to emphasize that the project is on the traditional territories of 3 First Nation communities: Fort William First Nation, the Red Rock First Nation, and Binjitawabig-Zaging Anishinabek First Nation, also known as BZA. We very much value a 4-way agreement with these 3 communities, communication protocol. Currently working towards an expiration agreement. We're advised by an Indigenous consultancy, JM Development Solutions. And furthermore, we do see great synergies here with the First Nations community, who obviously are very excited about the regional economic development prospects of this particular project. And just a couple slides on palladium pricing and so forth, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Abraham, and good morning, everybody. Good afternoon now, I guess. Look, the fundamentals for palladium that drove it to as high as $2,700 an ounce just a few months ago really haven't changed. Of course, COVID has changed lots of things in the world and has readjusted things in the short term, but palladium has held itself extremely well, staying close to $2,000 an ounce throughout this crisis. And this is with at least 45% of the mine supply offline for a couple of months. And of course, the auto industry was largely offline for those same couple of months, both trying now to come back to production. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the background to all of this, again, is the supply-demand fundamentals. Palladium largely, and platinum being largely consumed in catalytic converters in automobiles, and the market really being quite flat on the supply side, with Russia supplying 40% of the global supply from the nickel copper of the Norilsk deposits, South African platinum producers producing close to 40%. And so that supply picture does not appear to be changing. Now that the mines are back up to production, we are somewhat concerned that Norilsk is now in the latter stages starting to experience some challenges with the COVID crisis. It didn't initially shut down. Not a lot of transparency coming out of there at this point in time. But on the, if we flip to the next slide, Abraham, the consumption fundamentals haven't really changed. Much tougher emission standards globally, led by Europe and closely followed by the Chinese, combined with tougher testing criteria, this real driving emission, has driven a 30% increase in PGM loadings, which is primarily palladium with a rhodium sweetener, and platinum in the diesel market. And that's been the fundamental shift that's created quite a supply deficit in the market because the demand has increased dramatically. And that supply deficit has been made up by pulling down the surface stockpiles, the ETF funds, which are at historic lows, and increases in recycling. Is that going to change? The answer in the foreseeable future is no. The modern catalytic converter, very dependent on palladium as its primary element. Platinum does not perform as well in the high heat environment in a current catalytic converter design. And the auto industry is not spending a lot of effort trying to save a few $100 by redesigning catalytic converters and going through what would be years of testing to recertify a different design. They're focused obviously on the electrification, they're focused on automation, and not on changing the catalytic converter. So we believe, we show one graphic here on the right-hand side, which shows, I think, Bloomberg's projection of what is likely to happen with electric car growth. Hybrids do have higher loadings, actually, of platinum, palladium. than regular internal combustion engines due to the low heat on-off cycling nature. So the fundamentals are strong. They don't look like they're going to change long term. The electric car growth is actually somewhat necessary to take some of the heat off the market deficit for palladium. In the current term inside of COVID here, as both the auto industry and the mining industry is trying to get back to full speed, the Chinese have been net buyers. They put out some numbers just this morning that said they had 3.2% growth in the GDP growth, which is largely driven by significant government incentives. And of course, one of their largest industries is the automobile industry. And so they're back to heavily incentivizing the auto industry, which is certainly helping with palladium consumption. So despite some dynamics, actually the palladium price has probably been more stable through this COVID crisis than it was previously. And we think the fundamentals are going to stay strong. This market deficit is going to continue. And we're really quite bullish as we evolve into the electric car scenario. Of course, we have meaningful amounts of nickel and copper. And so we're really quite positive on the whole suite of metals that we have and what is likely to be the price point moving forward. So the scenario is still good despite the COVID crisis.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. And we'll move on here to the composition of the board at Clean Air. Jim and I RTO'd into the Shell Regency Gold back in February. It was since renamed to Clean Air Metals. We added 3 directors: Dean Chambers, chair of the audit committee, former CFO at Sherritt, but also Brookfield's designate for independent director on the North American Palladium Board at the sale to Implats. Marianne Crichton, also ESG and CSR specialist. She's also a director with the PDAC, Prospectors and Developers Association. She also consults worldwide with Hatch, various corporate clients on those issues, and very much has a heart for the First Nations, and looking forward to working with Marianne around First Nation presentations and so forth once the COVID crisis is behind us. And Ewan Downey, we added recently at the AGM, who is CEO of Premier Gold Mines. Ewan, his business associate. We worked on Premier Royalty together. We worked on Sabina Gold and Silver together. But also, more particularly, brings an experience base and accumulated wisdom around the transition of a junior explorer to a junior developer and miner and revenue generator. That is the school of hard knocks. And so Ewan brings that, that accumulated sort of experience to the table. Next slide is the capital structure for the company. We have 139.7 million shares issued, a significant warrant structure there. These warrants have traded in the money since inception, and they were generated in the February financing. About 14.5 million cash on hand, of which Eric Sprott owns 7.1% of the company, and Benton Resources 17% as a result of the payment to Rio back in October to lock up the deal and really get this whole transaction on a good path. We're also about 50% institutionally owned. Strong hands there, and trading well. Now some technical slides. Let's get into the update. So to set the stage, there's the intrusive complex. To the right, we have Current Lake, the established resource. 647 drill holes, 9.8 million tons. The particulars are online at cleanairmetals.ca at the back of the corporate presentation. That's AMEC did the last work on this, 2012. They did a PEA based on an open pit model. We're going to be looking at this from an underground, selective mining perspective. But the growth story here is the conduit to the left, I should say, called Escape Lake, GHI, and it's already been drilled, about 60 holes. escape lake portion in the yellow slide or the yellow square. That's where Rio focused and made a discovery, and which we're currently drilling off. And also there's continuity to the north, as demonstrated by panoramic. So we have two fertile structures here, and the growth of the company is in that escape lake trend. But I want to say some things about the massive sulfide potential at current lake as well from good evidence from previous drilling. This is what conduits look like. If you go to Norilsk and look at their deposits, you'll see structures that are much the same. These are lithological shells based on drilling. The scale, these are kilometers long bodies and significantly wide at depth. And the point is they are mineralized from top to bottom with disseminated sulfide mineralization, which carries PGEs and copper nickel. The escape lake body to the left is no different, and we are getting some very good results in that white square thus far in the what we call, what was colloquially called the escape lake high-grade zone. We now call the escape lake mineralized zone, which we believe shows continuity to the north and potentially to the south as well. And the layout, idealized layout that we've got on within that white square on the escape lake body is shown here with the phase 1 holes and the phase 2 holes heading up the pipe. That said, these are idealized, and what I mean by that is we've had run into a little bit of challenging drilling conditions in the overlying sediments, quite blocky and broken up. And so what we've done is we've inclined these holes and moved collars to the east a bit. So that explains that displacement. And we're happily intersecting the conduit slightly from the east at about 85-degree drill hole inclinations, and that seems to help us get through the sediments. But what you see peeking out at about 390 meters there is the escape lake high-grade zone discovered with these 6 holes of Rio, and we're now systematically drilling that off and stepping out, intending to step out to the south and to the north. This is what it looks like in plan view, and you can see some of those collars, that are kind of drilling with the inclined holes. And the intercepts that are building up on the body. Drill number 1 is working on that south margin there now. Drill number 2 is working on the north margin. We've got some good intercepts in the body, which is underpinned here by what we call an EM plate, borehole EM conductive plate, which more or less shows us the continuity of mineralization in this area. And we're currently testing the strike extensions to the north with geophysics. We've got Chrome geophysics out there right now, and they're energizing intersections to the north and south and seeing if there's continuity between them. Mapping that out as kind of a, to sort of pave the way for, systematic drilling. The results here, this is the PGMs, platinum and palladium. All these intercepts run between 1% and 2%, copper nickel combined, and in some cases up to 2.5% copper nickel. So, look, hole 4 down in the lower right area there, 7.49, sort of grams platinum palladium over 32 meters, and and about 2.5% copper nickel. And so, pretty decent intercepts there that really, at sort of current metal prices, are gross in situ metal values of, in that $1,000 a ton range. So very interesting. And so, certainly, Jim, in comparing this to Lac des Îles, any comments there?
Yeah, just I think for everybody to have some context, Lac des Îles mines, again, predominantly palladium. 90% of the revenue comes from palladium. And the average head grade in their life of mine model, and typically what has been mined, is about 2.3 grams per ton palladium. with some platinum and copper, nickel, and a little bit of gold, but that's less than 10% of revenue. And from the underground mining perspective, anything better than 3.5 grams palladium was considered high grade. So when you look at these intersections in the PGM intersections alone, it qualifies for high to very high grade relative to Lactazil. And then there's probably another 25% revenue kicker coming from the nickel and copper, which Lactazil has a very low grade nickel copper tenor. So this is really quite compelling. We are looking at the underground mining approach. The historic resource estimate that we have was generated as an open pit. For a lot of reasons, we don't think that's a viable approach anymore. So we're looking at a selective underground mining approach here, which will likely be a simple ramp access mine. These deposits tend to dip coming close to surface under the lake at average mine ramp grades. Not a difficult mining scenario. Some of the development likely can be in the lower grade ore. And selectively mining this to get a much better grade. And I'll just remind people that at that head grade, Lactazil in 2018 generated almost 200 million in free cash. So there's some really good potential here. We think the underground approach, and we have already initiated just recently with a technical services provider who is going to start looking at both the historic resource and the new material and some of the underground options as well as metallurgy. So yeah, we think the underground approach is really going to prove to be the right way to go here.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, and so looking at it again in a sort of zoom out a little bit in plan view, the red dashed lines are sort of what you saw on the previous slide, containing the sort of the higher grade mineralization. Rio did some reconnaissance drilling up to the north there within the Escape Lake block, and you know, had a couple of decent intercepts, which Crone is now testing for continuity, hoping to map out that you know, electrical conductivity pathway as a sort of a guide for you know, for our step outs to the north. To the south, obviously, you know, we've got some ponding of some fairly decent grade up against that Escape Lake fault. We believe the fault is actually the conduit for the actual intrusive activity in the Proterozoic. It's probably a splay off the Quetico fault, which is an Archean subprovince boundary in the Superior Province. And so it's quite a complex structural picture in there. That said, if it's a fluid pathway, it may also be a host for massive sulfide mineralization, which we are going to be testing with geophysics here going forward. And that's part of phase 3 that I'll be touching on momentarily. This is a table of the results to date. We own all the Rio Tinto holes now. You know, and the results there are reported, you know, Rio always reported to combined platinum palladium and combined copper nickel. You know, and we validated all those results, resampled, relogged. We have all our own drilling listed in the second half of that table, and some fairly compelling intercepts there, including in hole 4, you know, 32 meters of 7.4 grams combined platinum palladium, 2.3% copper, with an included intercept of 27 meters of 8 grams platinum palladium and 2.5 grams copper nickel, percent copper nickel, sorry. That's significant. I mean, those are, you know, again, they're going to be key value drivers on both sides of the equation there. So we're pretty excited about that in the early going. This is a section, kind of a slice through the conduit facing north or northwest here. And you can see a very nice, what shall we say, core zone with some very nice high grade over 10 grams combined platinum palladium there. Looking up the pipe you know, and the body of mineralization in red here within the intrusion. So, you know, hole 3, for example, had 78 meters of just under 4 grams combined platinum palladium with a 20 meter high grade sort of core to it. that fits in well with the the historical drilling to date. And so we're chasing this to the north and also into the southern area bounded by that escape lake fault. And so stay tuned. This is something that's being tested, but obviously there's also potential for some lateral growth here as well, and certainly the strike continuation as I mentioned. Just a slide here showing the more of a longitudinal section now showing the escape lake high grade zone in quotes, and the potential continuity with some hits up to the north. That is all being mapped out with magnetometric resistivity right now, which essentially means charging the body at this location on the north end of the escape lake high grade zone, and reading to see if there's continuity up here 650 meters north at hole 2010-0003. And in fact, there's more intercepts up to the north of that yet as well, which we'll be bringing into that whole testing regime. So very interesting times here for the team as they execute on this. And just a few thoughts then about high grade in the system. This is looking back at current lake. Here we have the grade distribution through current lake. The potential feeder zone area, which we call phase 3, we're actually doing geophysics, deep seeking resistivity there, looking at the architecture of the intrusion, which drives the whole system. Panoramic did drill through some massive sulfides there. We also have massive sulfides up in the central part of the intrusive of the current lake conduit up at the Beaver Lake Zone, 2.6 meters of 97 grams platinum palladium and about a half gram gold. That was the way Panoramic reported it, and about 14.9% copper nickel. We believe on good evidence that material was probably derived from the feeder zone area. And I'll just show you a slide of what that looks like. This is the material that we had on display at the PDAC in March. And that's right out of the 2.6 meter intercept, a meter here of 38 grams palladium, 50 grams platinum, 15% copper, and just under 3% nickel. Little bit, the platinum palladium grades are 1-to-1 roughly, but copper is about 5-to-1 here, and typical deposit ratio is about 2-to-1. So we've seen some fractionation of copper preferentially here, and we believe that it was not formed in place, that it's in fact an exploration vector to the source area. And the sharp contacts with the massive sulfides would lead us to believe that these are injections into their current position from, and so transported under high pressure to this location. So that's an exciting, sort of blue sky upside potential here. And we're very diligently chasing this down with geophysics as well. And once we have those targets, we'll bring in drill number 3 to drill them off. And so Thunder Bay North, there it sits on the north side of the Thunder Bay of the Lake Superior Basin on the Mid-Continent Rift. This is a camp, and Lac des Îles you see up to the northwest of there. We see Tamarack, of course, off to the west. Some good success there around massive sulfides, and of course Eagle on the south shore of Lake Superior, mining copper, nickel, and byproduct cobalt and PGs, lower grades of PGs, but these things are all zoned uniquely. And certainly, at Thunder Bay North, I think we have some pretty good prospects here that are emerging. Just point out Generation Mining over here as well. And so it's a true camp, and it's there for the right reasons. Very high magma flow from the rift in the Proterozoic. That's very similar to the Siberian traps up in Russia that host the Norilsk deposits. So these things are here for a reason, and they're natural and predictable outcomes of crustal evolution in these areas. So certainly Jim and I are available by email or by phone. These slides were all taken from the online deck at cleanairmetals.ca. And Carson Phillips, our VP Corp Dev in Vancouver, also happy to take your calls. Last two slides, a cartoon of the current lake resource showing the drill hole layout, and also AMEX explanation of their assumptions when they developed that open pit and a small underground resource there. Thank you very much.
So thanks, Abraham and Jim, for the great presentation, and congratulations on the results so far. I think you're headed in the right direction. So as I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can input them in the question box below. While we wait for questions, I think we talked about this a little bit in the previous update, but I wanted to chat a bit about the consistency of the deposit, which you can see kind of in these last drill results that came out. They seem to be very consistent at depth. Does this give you more confidence in the predictability of future results and where you'll be drilling going forward?
Short answer is yes, Tina, and thanks for that. I mean, as we can see from, the current lake distribution, sort of grade distribution, I mean, these things tend to be mineralized along their entire length. It's clear that fluid dynamics does play a role. Magma is a fluid, viscous fluid, but it's a fluid, and it responds to different to changes in pressure. And so one tends to have these sort of in the red and yellow, these sort of high-grade pods developed as, pressure comes off, metals precipitate, and then there again, thermal erosion takes place, and a small conduit opens up, and on it goes again, rushes into the next area, and that precipitation takes place. And this is an iterative process over time. And, some people talk about these like, they look a bit like horizontal kimberlites. And that is that's not a bad representation. And if you think of kimberlites, they pick up diamonds along their path from the diamond stability layer. These are, of course, horizontal, but if you think of massive sulfides, these picked up massive sulfides along their trajectory as well and deposited them upstream, shall we say, in the magma conduit. So that's an exciting exploration target for us as well.
And obviously the original resource was conceptualized as open pit, but you've seen some interesting intercepts at depth. Can you talk a little bit about the historical work that was done at depth?
Yeah, sure. Jim, maybe would you like to touch on that at all? Or?
Sure. So I touched on this briefly, the historical work, for the reasons that the initial part of the deposit was very close to surface. It's actually, it outcrops basically under the lake. As Abraham has said, the original discovery was some boulders on the shore of the lake from the original prospectors. So, the open pit approach is really, made sense to them at the time, but I think it ignored some of the permitting challenges, the stakeholder challenges of draining a lake, which was part of that study. So, and I think the key thing, even though there's a historic resource of almost 10 million tons, it only includes probably 50 to 60% of what you see on the slide that Abraham has up right now. So the deeper portion wasn't included in the open pit. There were subsequent studies done by various parties on adding a tail of underground mining. And I think all of that work showed that it added positive to the net present value. So our approach is really start from the beginning with an underground approach. Let's get the overall grade improved, because I think higher grade is the king. We've been asked many times what differentiates this deposit from some of the other new deposits, new projects that are out there, and it's really grade. Grade is always king. And as Abraham said, when you're talking several $100 up to $1,000 on some of these intersections, and that's not the entire ore body, there's really quite an opportunity to make a pretty good play. So we are starting initial studies with the engineering firm of converting the historic resource to an underground resource and updating that, and that work will be concurrent with examining the work that's happening now on the Escape Lake deposit. So we're well set up. We're not in a rush to generate a PEA or get this thing into mining. We really want to define what we have. We have two conduits, potentially a couple of kilometers apart. The synergies in mining the two of them together are somewhat obvious in terms of surface infrastructure and approach. And the real game changer here, phase 3 at depth. The greatest depth, we've been asked many times, is this getting too deep? Is it shaft? Most of what we're drilling now is sub 300 to 400 meters. That's very easy ramp accessible material, especially when you can follow that from surface. So we don't currently envision, unless phase 3 really pans out and we really do find that source of massive at greater depth. Right now, this is a fairly straightforward, simple footprint ramp access approach. Potentially custom processing, either with Impala Canada, perhaps with Lundin. You know, we haven't really started detailed discussions on that, but we're pretty certain there would be interest. But we're not ignoring the fact that it might be the best solution to build our own processing plant. So we're only just beginning and have initiated some of that technical work. And we really expect that to run out over the next 12 to 18 months. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And as Jim said, Tina, I mean, that's a 6 to 8 month process, so it's very much concurrent with the exploration over at the Escape Lake conduit.
Okay, and we have a couple questions from the audience. One of them is wondering what your claim ownership detail is currently and your option obligations going forward for the next year or so.
Yeah, so you know, basically our claim ownership, I'm just going to go back to the cap table. We own the claims 100%. They're in our name or in the name of our wholly owned subsidiary, Panoramic PGMs Canada Limited. That said, we hold them under option with Benton Resources, who put the deal together with Rio and Panoramic. Now, having said that, so really there's $7.5 million owing to those two parties in equal installments over the next 3 years. That is the obligation under the option. We owe Rio $1 million in October of this year. We owe Panoramic $1.5 million by way of example in May of next year, which is the 1 year anniversary of the closing of the deal. Now, and we're funded to do that. I mean, we're funded today. We have $7.5 million of hard dollars on board and about $6 million of flow. Well, actually, we have slightly higher. $8.5 million hard and about just over $6 million in flow. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to spend that hard on. You know, we're certainly anticipating those payments coming out of that hard dollar aliquot. But there's maybe another way here, and I'll just touch on it. The warrants that we have that we essentially issued in February have always traded in the money. The stock's trading in the 40-cent range. These are 30-cent warrants. They're good until March of 2023, and there is no forced convert on those. We quite intentionally decided not to put a force on it. That said, it's not unprecedented in the past. I've done it, Jim's done it, and Paradigm's done it. They were co-lead on the both raises. It's not unprecedented to incentivize a warrant exercise. And we're looking at the precedents now, but that represents 9 or 10 million if we were to incentivize the exercise of those warrants. For example, and it's nothing material at this point, but it's a consideration that would handily pay. We would use the proceeds would be paying out Rio and Panoramic before we build a resource, for example. I mean, so we do have some optionality here, which is gratifying.
And in terms of building out the resource, there's a question from the audience about how far away you are from a 43-101 and a PEA.
Yeah. So we're guiding. We've always guided 12 to 18 months since January. So that takes us up into Q2 next year.
And then in that vein, in terms of a timeline, I think we're expecting further results in a couple of weeks, and then you have the 2 drill rigs going, so should be some steady news flow.
Yes, well, we just put out news on July the 16th, 15th, 16th, but in any event, a couple of days ago, and yeah, the objective now with 2 drills, Tina, is to put out results from both drills on a monthly basis. So mid-month, next projected release is the 17th of August, which is a Monday. You know, and that's sort of you know, systematic release of drilling results, 6 to 8 holes a month between now and Christmas, and possibly into Q1. And then any other material information we'll pass along as it happens.
And when would you expect to make a decision on moving kind of beyond the 20,000 meters and into phase 3, or just continuing on drilling the phase 2?
Sure. Yeah, look, I mean, we're funded for 30,000 meters of drilling. We've committed to 20,000 meters of drilling. So when would we, you know, look, I think we're probably waiting for the results of the phase 3 geophysics on the deep intrusions, escape lake fault, where's the massive sulfides. We understand there are some poorly defined reflectors or plates at depth from the initial work done by Panoramic. So we're working to better define those. We think we have targets at depth, and you know, some of that remaining 10,000 meters, for example, might go into phase 3, and certainly, you know, I'm sure phase 1 and 2 can also use it going forward.
Great. I think that's it for the Q&A. Appreciate the update, Jim and Abraham. It's great to see that the drill program is being very successful so far.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Thanks for the opportunity. I very much appreciate it, and all the best to everyone.